Okay, let's take a look at this passage first. I think it was the first one, right? So it's a letter to Horace Greeley. I don't know who this guy is. So it's a letter to him. Who wrote this? An anonymous person. Doesn't know. We don't know who that person is. At the New York Daily Tribune on the National Women's Rights Convention in W, Massachusetts, originally published in 1850. Passage 2, adopted from Horace Greeley, remarks to A. Okay, so this is an anonymous person writing to a guy, but I think he's writing to the newspaper, right? So he's writing to the newspaper, and then after that, the person responds to that. So if you see a responding passage, the two basically, I mean, it said that this is a response, right? If it says that this is a response, this person will disagree with this person. 100%, they will. At least, I mean, the least they can do is partially agree, right? But still, I mean, you wouldn't write anything in response to someone if you completely agree with them. That's just crazy. If you say, hey, you say this, blah, 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 and I agree to all that, that's like a fan letter. It's you don't need to write that, right? So if you're responding to something, it means that you at least disagree with some of the points, and that's what you should be looking for. So you should be more careful when you're reading passage 2 than when you are reading passage 1. So let's take a look here. So I'm just going to delineate all the points here. Same thing we've been doing. We're going to try and focus on the repeating points, okay? It is clear that if we are going to live or have any private comforts, there must be. So again, necessary, right? So what's necessary? There must be dinners cooked. Children's faces must be washed. Okay, I think I get the idea, right? So this is talking about housework, just like domestic work. And there must be a home to which the mind of the weary husband. Okay, so here's a contrast, right? Husband versus, I mean, it doesn't say the wife, but it's implied, right? It's implied that this is the wife's job, right? Will turn to bear him up and urge him on in his toils for the inmates of that sanctuary. That sanctuary refers to the home, right? A home where he can for a time forget in his wife's and children's society the toils and troubles of this weary world. Okay, so this is how he portrays home. Home is a sanctuary, but home is a sanctuary for the husband, right? So that's what we get, and there's someone who needs to do this job. We need to do this. This is necessary, right? Can you see okay from there?
Yeah.
You sure? You don't want to sit here? It's all empty. Okay. A home which he can never leave without carrying with him a new grace, a new strength drawn from woman's influence. Okay, so I guess woman does influence the husband, right? To enable him victoriously and manfully to withstand the trials and temptations of the world. Okay, so I know there was a question on this, but even when I'm reading, the mindset that you should have is of reading an SAT essay prompt, right? So how did we read SAT essay prompts? We looked at the diction, we looked at the specific choices of words, and then we asked ourselves, why is he using those words, right? So it sounds like, it almost sounds like a guy coming back from a war or something, right? I mean, he does present it that way, right? I mean, the words he uses, it's like, okay, husband comes back from a battle and he needs a place to rest. It's like his sanctuary, right? So he's kind of trying to sway the readers into that direction, right? So to have that bias. Now, if women are given temptations of the world, no. Now, if women are given the right to vote, okay, so now we're moving on to something else, right? So what was the first idea? The first idea, I would say, it's about the home, right? Home, I don't want to box this actually. I only want to box people. So home is a sanctuary for husband. And at the same time, there are household duties. So that's pretty much the first idea. And then I see now if women are given the right to vote, to electioneer, to become stateswomen, why it is an incontrovertible fact that the dinners must go uncooked, the children's face unwashed, and home be forgotten. Okay, so he presented all the things, these are the things that he presented earlier, but now he's saying if women were to do that, this would be undone. Like there would be nobody to do this, right? Unless, indeed, the men exchange duties with them. Okay, so if we do this, then problem solved, right? Exchange duties. If we exchange duties, then nothing like this needs to happen, right? As was proposed at the convention, and stay at home and help their wives cook and wash the dishes. Okay, did he voice his opinion on this? Not yet, right? So he's saying, okay, if the husband exchanges duties with women, right? They swap positions, right? Stay at home and help their wives, and that kind of thing. Then we don't need to have this consequence. But I don't know how he feels about that, right? Okay, so let's take a look. So far from thinking women slaves, so he's far from thinking that. But actually, before I go, what was the other point? So if women are given the right to vote, right? What would this entail? The domestic duties being neglected, right? Now, if women are given the right to vote, to electioneer, to become... no. Well, this is something that we read. So far from thinking women slaves, I do not see how it can appear in such a light to any thinking mind, any true-hearted woman, right? Okay, so he says, I do not think of them as slaves. So far from thinking women slaves, but still, right? So he kind of says, yeah, I'm not saying women are like slaves, but I don't see how it can look like how this can be the case for any thinking mind, right? There is something so superior about women. Okay, actually, so I see something positive here, right? That would make one shrink as from profanation at the idea of her mingling in public with the sterner and worser sex. Okay. A spiritualization that raises her far above the intrigues of politicians and the vulgarity of rowdies. Okay, so I guess he says women are superior, right? So the inferior, the sterner and worser sex is men, right? And then it says a superiority which, if not acknowledged in words, is confessed in actions. So we can also see the superiority in actions. So women are superior. I don't know what he means exactly by superior, right? But we'll take a look. Even by men who, however degraded they may be, refrain from the slightest words or action that could be commented upon in the presence of women. Okay, so let's take a look here. Okay, so a superiority which, if not acknowledged in words, is confessed in actions. What's that mean? Like, even if nobody actually says it, no one actually says it, but still everybody acts like that's the case, right? Even by men, even by these group of people who, however degraded they may be, so even like the really low lives, as he says, right, degraded, refrain from the slightest word or action that could be commented upon in the presence of a woman, right? So yeah, they, like even the really degraded men, quote unquote degraded men, they don't, I mean, they act with respect, it's kind of implied, when they're in the presence of women, right? The women of Worcester Convention seem to have completely overlooked the immense power. What does it mean, overlook? Didn't we talk about this in class today? What does overlook, to overlook something, what does that mean? What does that mean? Huh? No. Yeah. Yes, 강과하다, right? So you, you know, so the people at this convention, they overlook the immense power given to women, right? So this is what he talked about in the previous part. In the previous part, what's that power? I mean, they tend to act differently when in the presence of women, and this, the home influence. What power can be greater than a mother's holy and elevated example? Okay, right. We must also remember that if women gain these absurd rights being suffrage, right to vote, right, they would be obliged to maintain them, okay? They would have the obligation to maintain them. They would have the obligation to maintain the right to vote. And this, they have not the strength to do. Okay, that's quite a point, right? So women do not have the strength to, they cannot maintain the right to vote. For which of the women at the Worcester Convention could knock a man down if he chose to stand up? So this for is used as a because here. Saying, because, you know, any woman who was at the convention, who could knock down a man? Like he's talking about it like physically, who can win a fight against a man? Right? I don't know how that's relevant, but he's saying, you know, like physically, they are different, men and women. I guess that's his point, right? And what man would come forward to protect a woman as long as she claimed to herself the right of self-protection, right? So nobody would protect a woman if the woman said, oh, you know, I can protect myself. Then they wouldn't protect them. That's what he's saying. I don't know how that point is relevant to right to vote. Why would that relate to voting rights? But anyway, that's what he says, right? Okay, so that's it. So it's not the best reasoning that he gives, right? So his primary reasons are this: there are domestic duties, right? I mean, aside from this, there are domestic duties, and there is something called a women's influence, and it's their privilege, right? And every man knows that, right? But women are not suited to vote because there's a physical difference, and if they choose to do that, they, you know, there's gonna be some kind of imbalance in the home because there's nobody that's going to take care of the domestic duties and that kind of thing, right? So that's his point, I guess. Right? Okay, and then we see a response to this. Okay, so let's take a look at this response. That the full and equal. Okay, so it's starting the sentence with the that. We've seen this before, right? Remember that passage that half the human population is excluded from political rights and whatever, that kind of thing, right? Are all political phenomena impossible to explain? Like that passage, right? It listed really long relative clauses in the very beginning. So let's take a look here. That the full and equal enjoyment of political franchise would improve the lot of women. Okay, so, I mean, you could take this in as the fact that, right? The fact that full and equal enjoyment of political franchises would improve the lot of women, right? Improve the group of women. So political franchise, this is just talking about the voting rights, right? May be doubtful. Oh, actually, wait, kind of confused. Why? Because, passage 1 was pretty sexist, but passage 2, it seems like it's pretty sexist too. So that's the trap that you shouldn't fall into. We talked about this before. When you're discussing women's rights, it's easy to just label one sexist and another one, this one is not sexist. It's advocating for equal rights. You shouldn't do that. Why? Because that's going to get rid of all the nuances. You're going to start injecting your own ideas into the passage. You don't want to be doing that. There's more nuances to a women's rights passage. Usually it happens if it's written a while back, all these passages. So if you look at them, they're going to say something like, for example, they're going to say, men and women should enjoy equal rights, but yeah, men are still superior, right? So there's going to be like these different points. It's not going to necessarily conform to what you think is a feminist point of view and what you think is a sexist point of view. It's not going to fit into that frame perfectly. So let's see. So this person says that's probably not, maybe doubtful. That's probably not going to improve the condition of women, okay? But we are willing to give the democratic theory a full and fair trial, okay? So he's saying we should try this though. Okay, so that's his important point, mentioned right at the beginning. So he says, so I would say this point is, okay, doubtful, right? Doubtful, but we should at least try it, right? Whenever so many women shall petition for the right of suffrage as to indicate that a majority of the sex virtually concur in the demand, then we shall insist that the franchise shall be extended to them. Okay, so when women petition, right? When women petition, yeah, I guess we should extend the right to them, right? Being a disciple of the faith which holds that all just government is founded on the consent of the governed. All right, so now, after this point, he's backtracking. He's backtracking, and he's talking about consent and the government, right? So that's something that you should be thinking about. Like you should note this transition. Okay, so he's taking a step back, and he's trying to justify his reasoning here. Okay, so what are his grounds? What are his grounds that support this point? We should extend those rights to women. The point is, disciple of the faith which holds that all just government. What's that faith? It's something called republicanism or democracy, right? All just government is founded on the consent of the governed. Well, okay, not necessarily democracy. Scratch that. We could do not less. Even though we knew that the women would make a bad use of the power, thus accorded them, right? Right first, expediency afterward, right? So, it's just saying, it's all, all governments, at the very foundation of every government is the consent of the governed, right? And so women are governed, right? They are the people. So if they say they want the right to that, yes, I feel like we do need to do that. So let's take a look at the next paragraph. As to our correspondence fear, that the correspondent being passage 1, right? Fear that buttered toast will run short and children's faces get crusted over, right? So that was his concern, right? Nobody's going to take care of the domestic sphere. In case the political rights of women are recognized as equal to and identical with those of men, we do not share it. Okay, so he says, I don't agree to that. So this is probably going to be the start of his counter argument. We know people who suppose that when slavery was abolished, okay, so he's talking about slavery now to justify his reasoning, justify his counter argument. So what's his counter argument? When slavery was abolished, there's some people who said that there could be no more boots blacked, no wood chopped, bacon fried, etc. So they're saying there's not, when slavery was abolished, they said, hey, who's going to do all the work, right? We don't have anybody to do the work. But what does he say? But we see that all needful operations go on, though slavery is abolished throughout this region, right? So he's saying, that's kind of a ridiculous concern. It will get done, right? As for your concern that domestic duties will not be fulfilled, that is quite ludicrous also, as this claim is. We see not why it may not be so in case the slavery of women should be in like manner be abolished, right? So he's saying it's the same thing. Same rule applies, right? Political franchises are but means to an end, okay? End being goal, right? Means being what? How you get to the goal, right? Political franchise are but ways to an end, to a goal, which goal is the securing of social and personal rights. This is our ultimate goal, right? This is our ultimate goal. Other classes have found the elective franchise serviceable toward the attainment of these rights, and we see not why it would lose its efficacy in the hands of women, right? So he doesn't understand, why can't we give this to women, right? And as to the exposure of women to insult and outrage in the town or ward meeting or at the election, we trust the effect would be just opposite to that anticipated. Okay, so the effect is going to be opposite, namely that men would be constrained by the presence of ladies to keep sober and behave themselves. All right. So men would be constrained. The presence of women has this effect ever in those public assemblages honored by her presence, and we trust its virtue is far from having been exhausted. So this is actually in accordance with passage 1. Passage 1 said this also, with the presence of women, women's influence, that kind of thing. So he also talks about this. As to women having to fight and knock down to maintain their rights if one conceded. So this is the point that passage 1 raised, right? Having to fight and knock down this point of view, right? That quite ludicrous point of view. We don't believe a word of it, okay? So that's what he thinks of it. Knock down whom? Certainly not those who cheerfully concede them all they ask. Right? Okay. So not the reasonable people. And if there are any of the other sorts, such brutes, right? So he uses a strong word here. Such brutes as choose to commence the game of knocking down, they would be very sure to get enough of it before coming to the women. Get enough of the beating before they come to the women, right? So as for your concern, that these women, they will have to knock down these men who get at them, but he's saying those men will be knocked out before they get to the women, right? So that's saying that's a ridiculous point of view. Okay, so before we go to the questions, if you have any questions. Okay, if not, we're just gonna go through the questions and then talk about it. Okay. So one of the main ideas of passage 1. So I have a bunch of ideas here, right? So I wrote down passage 1 because I felt like I was gonna forget it. This point, right? Home being the sanctuary for the husband, and there's household duties that will be neglected if women are given the right to vote. Women are superior, their presence, and I mean, it's good as it is. They don't need the right to vote, and we cannot, they cannot maintain the right to vote. And this was supported by his saying, women are like the physical difference. I don't know. Okay, let's take a look at A. Children will suffer unduly if their mothers work outside the home. Okay, so who chose A here? Okay, so if you chose A, I think do you know, what does unduly mean? Yes, very excessively, right? So what did passage 1 say? The passage 1 said, who's gonna wash the faces of children, right? That was his point, right? Children's faces will be unwashed, right? So I wouldn't if it says children will suffer or children will go through negative consequences or like children will be affected, that would be okay. But why excessively, right? I mean, that's a little bit too much. Okay, I mean, based on what he said, I'm saying, right? Okay, so their faces aren't washed, but is that really suffering excessively? So probably not this. I mean, if I don't see any other answer choice, I would probably go with this though. So this is the one that would be close. Women, in fact, possess greater political power than men. Really? Political power? No, he's not. Well, if he said just power, I would have thought about it, right? Because women have a certain influence that men don't have, but not political power for sure. Home life would be harmed. So this is more like it, right? Home life would be harmed rather than children suffer unduly, right? If women were allowed to exercise political authority. Okay, so this is the conditional directly mentioned in the passage. So C is the right answer. Next one, as used in line 1, clear most nearly means. Okay, so that I feel like it's going to be really easy because it's in line 1. It is clear that. Okay, fine, right? I mean, this is how we use clear most of the time. Like it's not, well, not most of the time, but in essays it's used quite often, right? So it is obvious, right? It's quite clear to us that, and then he makes his point. Okay, what main effects do weary, toils, and troubles? So this is what we talked about in the beginning of the passage. So it's really I don't know. It seems like I said, it sounds like they're coming back from a battle. It's really grandiose words. I mean, I think he's a little bit exaggerating, right? But let's take a look. Create a somber tone, perhaps, maybe, not a sinister tone though. What does sinister mean? Evil. Right? It's not evil necessarily. So get rid of this. Create an aggravated tone. Perhaps. I mean, depending on what's said after this. I just want to get rid of all the obviously wrong answer choices by looking at the beginning. What about D? They create a discontented tone. Perhaps he is discontented that they're agitating to vote. Maybe. I don't know. I'll have to see. So let's take a look at A. Create a somber tone that reinforces the importance of the home as a retreat from the outside world. Yeah, so he's constantly making a contrast between the home and the outside world. So the outside world is where husbands toil and they come back home weary, to the sanctuary and that kind of thing. So this is possible. What about C? They create an aggravated tone that conveys irritation with the stresses of marriage. Of course not, right? It will be the very opposite of that. It's their sanctuary. So not C. What about D? They create a discontented tone that underscores the hopelessness. Really? Is domestic life hopeless? No. It's a positive influence. It's a sanctuary. It's good. So it's A. Passage 2 greatly indicates that women must be given the right to vote when the majority of women demand it because, okay, so what was his reasoning, his primary reasoning? So that's the foundation of the government that we talked about, right? So this is passage 2, by the way, it's not passage 1. So passage 2 it was talking about a government is the foundation of a government is the consent of the governed, right? And that was his primary reasoning. So I want to, you need to, I mean, not you need to, but I mean, if you didn't think of this instantly, if you didn't think about this instantly, if you couldn't pre-phrase this answer, then maybe you could have accounted for the passage a little bit better, okay? So let's take a look. Women have been granted that right by the courts. Well, no, it's not by the courts, right? It's just the very basics of a government, right? Granting that right is consistent with the idea of a government based on democratic principles. Okay, I mean, yeah, government based on democratic principles, consent of the governed. So I would say this is what I was looking for, as long as I don't see a better one. Men have done a poor job of electing, no. The United States is out of step with other, no. We're not talking about foreign affairs. We're not talking about other countries. Didn't even talk about the United States. That was not a topic explored. Next one. Which statement can reasonably be inferred from passage 2 about Greenlee's position on women's right to vote? Okay, so if you notice, all the statements are written in an although A B statement, right? So although subordinate clause, main clause. Although subordinate clause, main clause. So it's going to be two contrasting ideas, right? So I think I spot a contrasting idea like instantaneously. Why? Because I remember that idea just sticking out in the very beginning. What did it have? It said, he was kind of doubtful that whether giving women the right to vote is going to actually positively influence them. But he said they deserve it nonetheless, right? So that stands out. So if I see that, well, actually there's a line reference though. So why don't we just take a look? So if you couldn't spot that, it would be better for you to look at the line references. And when you're looking at the line references, what would you be looking at? Since we're looking for an although A, B statement, and these two things are going to be in a contrast relationship, it kind of looks like a face. So you want to choose an answer that has two elements to it, two contrasting ideas within it. So I'm looking for two contrasting ideas in lines 55 to 59. Let's take a look at 55. So 55 says, being a disciple of the faith which holds that all just government is founded on the... Wait, am I looking at the right question? So let's take a look, 55. Being a disciple of the faith which holds that all just government is founded on the consent of the governed, we could not do less even though, okay, so here we go. I see even though here, right? So I see that contrast. We knew that the women would make a bad use of the power. There we go. So I think this is the answer, right? Even though they might make a bad use of it, we still should give them the right. So I would go with A here. And for this answer, I mean, for this question, here, see it here, right? So he has reservations, right? So this is rephrased here, right? More mildly. It's the next one. Based on passage 2, Greenlee would most likely view the concerns about women's neglect of household duties expressed in passage 1 as, okay, so how would he view that? Okay, I mean, I think he directly mentions this part, right? So if you take a look here, it's this point, right? So he said, yeah, I get your concern, right? But what does he say? Yeah, well, people thought like that back when we had slavery abolished, but nothing really happened. And this is, I guess, kind of similar to that situation. And I wouldn't worry too much about that. That's basically what he's saying. So let's take a look. So I would say, okay, is it amusing? And I'm not sure. Pervasive? No. Troubling? No. Probably exaggerated. That sounds okay. Let's take a look here. Because past concerns of a similar nature. So this would be slavery, the abolition of slavery, right? Rephrased here. So it would be D here. Author of passage 1 would most likely concede that Greenlee's claim regarding women's potential exposure to insult and outrage is... Okay, so what would passage 1... Greenlee's claim regarding women's potential exposure to insult and outrage. Okay, sorry, I just kind of I just kind of forgot. So this is passage 2, right? Right. So we need to find the part in passage 2 that talks about women's potential exposure to insults and outrage, right? But what did it say in passage 2? That women have that influence over men also, right? So men change their behavior when they're in front of women. Right? Men change their behavior when they're in front of women. And what would passage 1 say to that? I would say he would agree, right? He would say, yeah, that one I do agree. So I would say somewhat plausible, mostly correct, generally true, largely accurate. Oh, okay. So I guess I need to read everything, right? So somewhat plausible, since men rarely consider the needs, since men are egotists? No, not exactly, right? Mostly correct, since men's pride usually, well, it's not about men's pride, it's about women's influence itself. Men's behavior would be tempered by women's virtuousness, so it would be this, right? They are the superior sex. That's what passage 1 said. Largely accurate, since most men would be likely to ignore the threat. What? I don't understand why that would be relevant. I mean, it's not mentioned at all. So C would be the answer. And for this one, we're asking for the part in passage 1 that talks about women's influence. So I would need to go back to passage 1 and look at the line references. So I'm just going to look at 22 to 24, see if that talks about women's influence over men. 22 to 24. Says, so far from thinking women slaves, I do not see how it can appear in such a light to any thinking mind, any true-hearted woman. Well, this one, it's not talking about any influence. What about the next line? There is something so superior about women that would make one shrink. Yeah, so this line, right? So 24, that answer choice that contains 24, is that, so that's B. Okay, let's take a look at this Nelson Mandela passage, okay? So this is actually a pretty easy passage, right? But when you're reading easy passages, you should be rather alert, right? The challenges of a relatively easier passage, it's not necessarily from the language of the passage, it's from the fact that they can sometimes ask you pretty detailed questions, and they can take advantage of the fact that the passage itself, the language is pretty consistent, and it seems like all of them are talking about the same thing. So you need to be able to distinguish between the different points a little bit better for relatively easier passages. Okay, so let's take a look here. It says in the prologue, for many years, Mandela led a peaceful and non-violent campaign against the South African government and its policies. Okay, so this, I guess it's common sense, right? Non-violent campaign, that's what he did. So what can I guess from this? I can guess that this person, it's not going to say anything so aggressive. He's just going to talk in a really tempered manner, and advocate for peace and that kind of thing, right? So that's my guess before I go into the passage. And let's take a look. So it says, today all of us do, by our presence here, and by our celebrations in other parts of our country and the world, well, all right. What is this sentence? Like, why so much? Like, all of us do confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. That's the sentence, right? I mean, all of the other ones is just modifiers, right? So basically, they're gathered there, and he's saying, on behalf of everyone else, we confer glory and hope to newborn liberty, right? So he's celebrating, right? Saying, okay, now we have liberty. Let's confer glory upon that. And then it says, out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster, it lasted too long. Okay, so what's that extraordinary human disaster that he's probably referring to? Yes, the apartheid, right? Racism, yes. Like, you know, in South Africa, there were classes, right, based on race, right? Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud, right? Okay, so since they went through something so bad, they now we should have something that we will be proud of. Our daily deeds as ordinary South Africans must produce an actual South African reality. Okay, this is important. I don't need to tell you why, right? So he's saying something is necessary. What is necessary? We need to make an actual South African reality. But what does he mean by South African reality? That will reinforce humanity's belief in justice. That's what he wants, right? Reinforce humanity's belief in justice. That's what this South African reality is. Strengthen its confidence in the nobility of the human soul and sustain all our hopes for a glorious life for all. Well, okay, so it sounds very abstract. He's just talking about ideas, nothing concrete. So it can seem like, oh, you know, it's just like a bunch of positive words, right? So then you need to hold on to this a little bit more, right? I bet this will be in the questions. I mean, there's really nothing to ask. Like as a test giver, I mean, test maker, you really can't find anything else other than asking for the necessary conditions and some of the prescriptions in this passage. All this we owe both to ourselves and to the peoples of the world who are so well represented here today. Okay, so we owe to the people. Okay, so so far he wants to make a South African reality, and that's going to be one, reinforcing humanity's belief in justice, strengthen its confidence in the nobility. So I just want to circle this. And sustain our hopes. Sustain hopes. So these three ideas, I feel like, would characterize that South African reality. To my compatriots, I have no hesitation in saying that each one of us is intimately attached. Okay, so I just want to get the key word here. I don't know what he's trying to do yet. To the soil of this beautiful country, as are the famous jade trees of P and the mimosa trees of the B, right? Okay, so I mean, we're attached to the soil. Attached to the soil, okay, fine. Each time one of us touches the soil of this, and we feel a sense of personal renewal. So I'm just gonna grab some keywords here and just go, right? That should be my reasoning, because it's not so dense now. The national mood changes as the seasons change. Okay, national mood changes as the seasons change. I guess, well, I mean, strictly speaking, this would be a correlation, but it's mostly just rhetoric, so I'm just going to let this go. We are moved by a sense of joy and exhilaration when the grass turns green and the flowers bloom. Okay? Joy, exhilaration. So this is actually mentioned in response to the statement made before, right? As the seasons change, the mood changes as the seasons change, right? That spiritual and physical oneness we all share with this common homeland explains the depth of the pain we all carried in our hearts as we saw our country tear itself apart in a terrible conflict. Okay, so this is something that's consistently appearing, that attachment to land, the spiritual and physical oneness with this land, right? Okay. So that explains the depth of the pain we all carried in our hearts, right? So they were so attached to this land, and seeing this terrible thing happen here, it affected all of them. And as we saw, it's spurned, outlawed, and isolated by the peoples of the world precisely because it has become the universal base of the pernicious ideology. What does pernicious mean? Something really bad and harmful. That's what pernicious is, right? So what's that pernicious ideology? Probably racism, right? Practice of racism, something along those lines. We don't need to know exactly what happened. I mean, it's not requiring us to have any prior knowledge. And racial oppression, I can just grab onto this, right? We, the people of South Africa, feel fulfilled that humanity has taken us back into its bosom, that we, who were outlaws not so long ago, have today been given the rare privilege to be a host to the nations of the world of our own soil. Okay, so I'm just going to say this is an old and new, right? We used to be outlaws, right? This is the old, and now they're hosting the world, right? So this is the new. So that change, he appreciates that change. The time for the healing of the wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. The time to build is upon us. Okay, so now he's talking about the future possibilities. Right? We have at last achieved our political emancipation, freedom. We pledge ourselves to liberate all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. Okay, so this is what they promise. They want to liberate the people from the bondage of this now. Okay. So now it's not necessarily about racial oppression. Now they're saying, okay, we need to move on to other things, right? Other kinds of discriminations, other deprivations and sufferings. So this, we want to promise ourselves to get rid of. We succeeded to take our last steps to freedom in conditions of relative peace. Okay. We succeeded to take our last steps to freedom in conditions of. So their last steps, I guess. I don't know what exactly he's referring to, but I guess the last stages of their conflict or that kind of thing, right? And that was in relative peace. We commit ourselves to the construction of a complete, just, and lasting peace. Okay. So again, this is what he promises. So this passage itself, it's about making promises for the future. It's giving the direction that the nation should go in, kind of speech, right? We have triumphed. What does triumph mean? Yes. Victory, right? We have triumphed in the effort to implant hope in the breasts of the millions of our people. Okay, hope. We enter into a covenant. What's a covenant? What?
Places where nuns live.
No.
No.
Well, it's a promise, but like a hardcore promise. Okay? A real hardcore promise, like real old school covenants. If you make a covenant with the person, okay, and you don't follow that, you die. That's the very old school covenant, right? But anyway, but I mean, I don't think he means it that way, right? Just like it's a really strong promise, right? It's not just a promise, like a covenant that we shall build the society in which all Africans, both black and white, will be able to walk tall without any fear in their hearts, assured of their inalienable right to human dignity, right? So, you know, he's not just saying just black people, but both black and white people, and they will not have any fear, and they will have inalienable rights. A rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world. As a token of its commitment to the renewal of our country, the new interim, what's an interim government? Like a transitional government, right? Something that's not permanent, right? It's just there momentarily. Okay, the new interim government of national unity will, as a matter of urgency, address the issue of amnesty for various categories of our people who are currently serving terms of imprisonment. Okay, so if you grant amnesty for prisoners, what does that mean? You let them go, right? So, you know, on some national holidays, I don't know if Korea still does it, right? I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. On some national holidays, like August 15th or stuff like that, they grant amnesty to certain prisoners and they let them go, right? That's what it is. We dedicate this day to all the heroes and heroines in this country and the rest of the world who sacrificed in many ways and surrendered their lives so that we could be fine. Okay, so we dedicate this day to all the people who sacrificed. Their dreams have become reality. Freedom is their reward. Okay. We are both humbled and elevated by the honor and privilege that you, the people of South Africa, have bestowed on us as the first president of a united, democratic, non-racial, and non-sexist South Africa to lead our country. Okay, I mean, I don't think he's talking about anything in substance now. Like he's just kind of, you know, it's like a just salutary remark now. We understand it's still that there is no easy road to freedom. Okay, so no easy road to freedom. We know it well that none of us acting alone can achieve success. So alone, we must therefore act together. Reconciliation. So those are the things that I grabbed, right? Okay, so it seems like a very bland passage, but we'll see what happens in the questions, okay? Okay, why don't we take a quick break and then we'll come back. Okay. So if A were to be the answer, so it says convince the South American people to support a new form of government, and it feels like you could fall for this potentially because it does mention the government, and it's not it's saying otherwise. It's talking about all the what is it? All the possibilities of the future and that kind of thing. It seems like that's what the government is offering, kind of thing. But you would need to actually just think about the words that he said and the tone. Just leave this and move on. Reprimand other countries, of course not. Remember the hardships of the South American people overcame. Okay, so is he just commemorating? This would be him commemorating, right? So this is not exactly his main focus, right? What about D? Encourage the South African people to come together in rebuilding their nation. Yeah, this sounds like the best one, right? So he's talking about all the past experiences and talking about all the future possibilities. This one seems the best here. So D would be the answer here. And this one is talking about which one would summarize the passage. So A says humankind is capable of evil. It is mentioned that there was oppression and that kind of thing, but he didn't talk about humans' capability of doing that, and especially when this comes, right? When granted freedom. So no, the ideas that he associated with freedom is the positive ones. It's not saying like, oh, we need to be careful when you have freedom. You can potentially commit evil. So that's not it. B says it was the sacrifices of ordinary citizens that ended the. No, okay. We did talk about sacrifices, but that was only a small part at the very end. So although it is true, I would say this one needs some consideration. Although racial oppression wounded the country of South Africa, okay, a new season of peace and liberty will heal it. Okay, so I do remember this. Racial oppression wounded the country, and he did talk about this a lot, right? And this, of course, was the main focus of the passage. So something that's written in this form with the subordinate clause and the main clause being the primary focus, this one would be okay. And this one is also written in a contrast with the main and subordinate clause. Let's take a look. Although nations across the globe promised to work together to put an end to racism, many countries failed to respond. Okay, it's not necessarily failed to respond. And we don't talk about other countries either. So C would be the answer. Mandela includes a statement in lines 4 to 6. Okay, so let's go back to 4 to 6. What does it say? Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster lasted too long must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. Okay, so they experienced that. Those bad conditions, and out of that, there will be something good that happens, right? So it's not about healing necessarily. That would be some kind of gradual change. Extraordinary South African heroes. No, of course we are not talking about heroes. The best way, I don't know anything about the best way. South African society must learn from its failings. Okay, so this is mentioned and this is also mentioned, so I would go with D here. Mandela implies that for the nation to achieve its potential, it is most important. Okay, so most important, so I'm thinking, yeah, it's probably going to be talking about some of the things that he said are necessary, right? And I do remember me annotating that. So, and we have a line reference also. So I want to take a look at this line reference, and check if we have any there. So 7 to 11. So I do see that part here, right? Daily deeds as South Americans must produce an actual South African reality, this one. And this one is the one that we talked about, right? So the first one was to reinforce humanity's belief in justice, and 2, strengthen confidence in the nobility and sustain all hopes. So something that goes along that line. So I would say 30 is the right answer, first of all. It's not gaining confidence in the political system. It's mostly talking about, like hope and that kind of thing. Live each day with integrity. Yeah, this one is the real South African reality. It could be something like that, right? So this one is okay. Other countries, not other countries. So B. Moved. Okay, so let's take a look at line 23. Wait. We are moved by a sense of joy, right? So usually when you say you're moved, it's that, right? Like how you use it in the usual sense. We're moved by something, okay? So we are not, okay, so it's not necessarily changed, although you could fall for this. It's rather stirred, right? So that's what you say when you're moved. It means you feel something in you, right? Okay. Mandela's purpose for repeating the phrases the time and has come in lines 38 to 41 is most likely to, okay, the time has come. So, and then it's asking for a purpose. Okay, so 38 to 41. Okay, he's using a lot of repetition here, right? The time for healing has come right now. The moment to bridge has come. The moment has come. The time is upon us, right? So he's saying we need to act now. That's the sense that he's trying to convey here. So it would be C. Based on the passage, which choice most closely describes Mandela's perspective on freedom? Okay. So, do we have a line reference? We don't have a line reference. So, we're just going to go through the answer choices and go through a process of elimination then. So, freedom. Well, yeah, of course he looks at it in a positive light. So freedom is a privilege people earn. No, he would say it's a right, just a natural right for people. So not something that people earn. Freedom is not easily attainable, but it is worth fighting for. Yes. This would be okay. What about C? Enjoyed in times of peace must be sacrificed in times of war. Okay, we did not talk about war at all. Freedom of a nation is more important. Okay, so this is an unwarranted comparison. We've never seen any comparisons like this. So I'm gonna get rid of this. So it's probably B, through a process of elimination. Last question. Which of the following does Mandela suggest is most important to ensuring South Africa's continued progress? Okay. Well, let's take a look. Unity among people. He did talk about this, especially towards the end. What about pride in the land? He did talk about the land, but the idea that he associated with land was oneness, right? We are attached to the land. That's why he mentioned this. Not so much pride. Celebration of fallen heroes. But he doesn't say that's the most important thing. Investigation of past wrongs. Well, I would feel like he would rather put it behind himself. So not investigating into that. It would be just unity and moving forward. That would be his focus. Okay, sorry, I'm really low energy today. I have this like really bad headache right now. Let's take a look at this one. What to the slave is the 4th of July. Okay. So I guess he's saying what kind of significance does the 4th of July have on a slave, right? So what's the 4th of July? Independence Day, the day that the Declaration of Independence was signed, right? So for Americans, it means a lot, right? It's the day that they gained independence from the British Crown, right? So let's take a look. Douglass, a noted abolitionist. Okay, so what's an abolitionist? What's an abolitionist?
One who wants abolishment.
Yeah, someone who wants to abolish slavery. Okay, and then he gave this speech to an anti-slavery group in Rochester, New York. Okay, so everybody listening is also anti-slavery. Okay, so let's take a look here. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? Okay, well, I don't know, you tell me. What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Okay, so he's saying, like, what's the relationship between your national independence and me, right? What's the relationship? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? Oh, okay. I think I get his point now, right? His point is, all the principles of freedom, is it extended to me, right? This person is a former slave, right? He's black, and he's making a point. He's making a point that this has nothing to do with me. It's about the national independence of the white people, but I'm still slave, that kind of thing, right? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offerings to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude, right? So he's saying, do you want me to be thankful here? Right? Do you want me to celebrate this day of independence? I mean, I'm a slave, right? That kind of thing. Well, I mean, he's not a slave, but he's saying that freedom is not extended to him, right? He was a former slave, is what I mean. I mean, he's a former slave. And I don't think he has the right to vote or that kind of thing. Like, he doesn't have those civil rights granted to him, that kind of thing. Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that would to God. Okay, so this is a phrase that you don't hear that often. So it's a pretty obsolete phrase. Would to God. What does that mean? Would to God. Have you guys ever heard of that? Would to God. So if I say would to God, that means please let that happen. Please let that be the case. So I would say something like, if I say, I really hope you guys did your homework. Would to God that you guys did your homework. Right? So it's just used in that manner. So he's just saying, would to God that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Right? So he's saying, please, I want an affirmative answer to these questions. Right? Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful, right? So if he gets an affirmative answer for that, it would mean that the rights are all extended to him, right? He wants to see the day that those rights extended to all the white people are also extended to him, right? For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy cannot warm him, right? Okay, so a nation's sympathy can warm Everybody is what he means. Right? Who's so obdurate and dead? What does obdurate mean? So a really low frequency word. I wouldn't go about memorizing it anyway. But it means, do you guys know the word intractable? What does this mean? Or obstinate? Yeah, stubborn, and you don't change, right? You're not likely to change your opinions, right? Who's so obdurate and dead to the claims of gratitude that would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? So, right, so still, you see that point of repetition. So he's saying, everybody would like their nation's sympathy. Everybody would thankfully acknowledge the benefits of a country, benefits that a country could offer, right? Who so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee when the chains of servitude had been torn from his limbs? Who would not celebrate all these freedom? Okay, so all the same points here, right? All the same points. I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak and the lame man leap as an hart. Okay. What's a hart? Says in the footnote, does it?
Type of deer in the Bible.
Okay. So dumb might eloquently speak. So if that happens, is a dumb person likely to eloquently speak? No, he's saying. And would the lame man means what? So probably somebody who can't jump, saying lame man leap as an harp, right? But such is not the case, right? So these benefits are not extended to me. So still going along those lines. It's not the state of the case. I say it with the sad sense of the disparity between us. What does disparity mean?
Difference.
Yes, difference. You should also remember parity. Parity means the same, right? So if you say something like by a parity of reasoning, it means by the same reasoning. They use that one a lot, right? I say it with the sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. I am not included, right? So, this is all that he's been saying so far. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance. All right, so I think I get it now. Disparity, immeasurable distance. Blessings in which you, to this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. Not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. Right? I think it's getting too old now. He's still just talking about the differences, and these are not extended to me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. Okay, come on. I want to see the next point now. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon to join you in joyous anthems were inhumane mockery and sacrilegious irony, right? So yeah, he's kind of offended, right? Why are you inviting me to this 4th of July party, and why are you telling me you're part of this? I'm not part of this, right? Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? Wow, pretty aggressive here. If so, there is a parallel to your conduct, and let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the example of a nation whose crimes, luring up to heaven, were thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrecoverable ruin. I can today take up the plaintive lament of a peeled and woe-smitten people. Okay, so let's just go on. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept and we remembered Zion. Is this?
It's a group
Okay, but this is in the passage, right? We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they who wasted us required of us mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing at the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, if I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Okay, so why is he quoting this?
It's the experience of Jewish exiles in the city of Babylon.
Okay, so Jewish exiles, right, in the city of Babylon. Were they free people? You guys know about this? Okay, so Jewish people, they were slaves, right? And it's a quotation about that. So he's drawing a parallel between them and the black people's conditions right now, right? Okay, so let's take a look here. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions. Okay, so I mean, this passage is all rhetoric and no points, basically. Whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Okay. So, all right, so take a look here. So, on one hand, we have this, right? People are being very joyous, but he doesn't really hear this. What he hears is the mournful wail, right? Like of all the black people, right? And so they have those chains attached to them, right? Which are heavy and grievous, are today rendered more intolerable, right? So today they're even more intolerable. Why? Because people are being happy here, right? So while they are in chains, they need to hear other people singing joyous songs, celebrating their liberty and freedom. That's what he's saying, right? So let's go down here. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason. Would be treason most scandalous and shocking. Okay, so it would be treason, right? To join in would be scandalous and shocking. It would be treason, basically, right? To join in on this. And would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject and fellow citizens is American slavery. Okay, so now he directly talks about this. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Standing there, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Okay, so basically this passage is just his sentiments about how he feels to talk at this spot, right? On a celebration, right? So he obviously is not so happy about him not having the equal rights, and all the people are just celebrating their freedom. So it's kind of ironic, and he draws parallels to the Bible and to make his point. Why would he draw parallels to the Bible? Because everyone agrees with the Bible back then. It's not that anyone was an atheist or something like that. So let's take a look. Primary purpose of the passage. Okay, primary purpose of the passage So A says propose. Okay, so no. He's not proposing anything. He didn't say we should do anything. Question, okay, if it says question, I would expect something like question why he's there and, the implications of 4th of July, like it extending to everybody. Question the wisdom of celebrating the ideals of an earlier generation. No, it's not the earlier generation. Explain the ethical values underlining. No, he's not explaining anything. Contrast, yes. Revered political principles with social reality. So D would be the right answer. Questions in the first paragraph primarily serve two. Okay, so what's in the first paragraph? So So, I mean, it's a series of questions, right? Why am I called upon to speak here today? Why am I speaking? I don't have anything to do with your independence. So, making those points. So, remember that when you have a question, it can serve three purposes, and the three purposes that we talked about all the time, right? What do they do? Explore an ideal that he will abandon? No, he's just making a point. He's just making a point that this place is irrelevant to him. Reveal a motivation that Douglas will analyze. Well, I don't see what that motivation is. Raise a possibility that Douglas will discredit. Raise a possibility that Douglas will discredit. Okay, let's take a look at D first. Summarize a claim that Douglas will endorse. Okay, so he's not endorsing. I mean, he's not. First of all, he's not summarizing any claim, right? So I'm not so sure about this. So what would that possibility be? Raise a possibility that he is going to discredit. So let's take a look. So it's potentially it's here. Am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits, right? So should I talk about the benefits? And then he says, no, it really doesn't mean anything to me because this doesn't extend to me. So it would be C here. Pardon me and allow me to ask. Okay, so this is actually done in a lot of old passages, so you need to know this. But I think this is the only time they directly asked you about this, right? They use all this language to appear very polite, right? It's just the way that they talk. Like, instead of just saying, why do you think like that? That's ludicrous. They would say something like, permit me to ask the gentleman, or something like that, right? So same here. Pardon me, allow me to ask. So that would be A, appearance of courtesy. Douglas makes which points about the 4th of July? Okay, it's not national pride. It should not be, he's not saying it should not be celebrated, but he's saying it doesn't mean much to me. You should know it doesn't mean anything like that. It impresses upon him the disparities. Okay, so there we go. I like this. It inspires him to work hard. No, so it would be C here. And I guess the answer to this it will be this part. So line 24, that does it, right? Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance and not enjoyed in common. So these all speak to the disparities. Douglas indicates that expecting him to celebrate the 4th of July is, okay, so he's saying it doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to get rid of satisfying. I'm going to keep all of these. Okay, ironic given his hostility to the ideal. No, he wants them. He says, who would not want that, right? What about C? Insulting to both him and the values being celebrated. Okay, that sounds pretty good. What about D? Upsetting to people who do not believe. No, it's upsetting to him, not to other people. So C is the right answer. So insulting to him and the values. So which line would that be? That would be, it will be 32, right? Drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems. Like you tie up a person and then you bring him and then you say, hey, let's sing together, right? That's insulting. A significant contrast that Douglas draws between himself and his audience is that it's not that he refuses to rejoice. Well, okay, wait. Refuses to rejoice in the country's freedoms while those freedoms are being denied to slaves. Yeah, this would be the one. So this is actually good. If you look at the other answer choices, thinks the holiday should memorialize the nation's founders. No, he's saying it should be extended to us, all the principles in that document. Questions the value of the United States founding principles. He likes them, actually, and he wants them. Believe that slavery is a moral issue, not merely a political one. No, it is a political one for him, so it would be A here. In saying, I am not a man, Douglas suggests that okay, so I am not a man. So, I mean, I get it. Let's take a look here. I am not that man. Okay, so who is that man? So if you take a look here, he's talking about all the people, right? All the people are going to acknowledge the priceless benefits that the country has to offer. They would be so happy to have all those benefits. But he's saying, I'm not part of that. I'm not part of that. So A says, could not resist the joyous feeling of patriotism if he enjoyed equality with his audience. Well, yeah, if he could get it, he says, no man would not acknowledge the benefits. So he's saying everybody would know the benefits of that. Everybody would love the nation's sympathy and that kind of thing. So this is okay. Could not explain the 4th of July holiday to those who remain enslaved. No, he's not saying he could not explain it. Is not motivated by self-interest. Well, these are all irrelevant. He's talking about how good those benefits are and that kind of thing. So it would be A here. So state, when it comes to state, it's usually going to mean, so like here, condition or nation. Usually it's these two things, right? So, but you should be able to distinguish between these two, right? So let's go back to line 22. Such is not the state of the case. So it's talking about right now, right? It's not talking about a country here. It's talking about the condition, which is C. Okay. Okay.